At the California Geological Survey, all eyes and ears are on the equipment that is constantly registering earthquake activity across the state. We even caught something happening as our camera was rolling.
It's amazing when you pull up the USGS latest earthquakes in California. You can
It just moved. It just moved. It's moving right now.
Maybe it's
That's the Oroville Dam.
But it was nothing out of the ordinary. Small vibrations are constantly recorded. But this is what a real one looks like. This is the actual register of the 6.0 Napa earthquake that struck this past summer. And just days after that earthquake, I felt a 3.9 aftershock while on the air in Vallejo.
What was that? Earthquake.
But that was on a different fault than the San Andreas, which is due for something big.
We will very likely in our lifetime experience a big one, so high magnitude 6 to larger than magnitude 7 earthquake.
But the question is where and when, and no one has a clear answer despite the latest and greatest technology.
For the San Francisco Bay Area, there is probably 67% probability that one of the major faults in that area will rupture with a magnitude 6.8 to 7 in the next 30 years.
And for the Bay Area to experience a repeat or worse of what happened in 1989 is hard for many to imagine, but the big one could just as easily strike the southern portion of the fault instead.
It's a very serious thing. It will have economic repercussions on our state that nobody alive will have experienced before.
The San Andreas Fault spans hundreds of miles, and where the big one will hit is anyone's guess. Even the experts admit there is no truly accurate way of knowing.
It's kind of like going to the casinos. You're putting probabilities on this phenomenon.
Jeff Maher, News 10.
And that is what is so scary because we just don't know. You guys know I grew up in Southern California, so I grew up in smaller earthquakes. I've experienced them, but we've always thought, okay, when is the big one, and what does that even mean? What is the big one?
Yeah, and they don't know. They have all of this advanced computer technology there, and they just don't know. With the San Andreas Fault, as I mentioned, it spans hundreds of miles, but those guys are doing really important work because based on their research and the earthquakes that happen, they can give very important information to developers. So when they are building new buildings and homes, then those buildings can be up to code. You know if you're along a fault line, etc. But they pointed out that in the Bay Area, which apparently is ripe for another earthquake, there are still thousands of buildings that are not up to earthquake code. And a perfect example of that is what happened in Napa. Most of the damage from the Napa quake happened in the downtown historic area where you saw, older buildings built back in the 1900s and before that, huge pieces of facade falling to the ground. You're not going to see a lot of that with the newer buildings, but the older buildings you will.
What's a big one, Jeff? I mean, what are they talking about? To them, what would be a big quake? 8.0? What's big?
I think their range is anywhere between a 6 and a 7.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Because Alaska's had like a 7. Those are
right. They pointed that out. Actually.
What do you call that?
But isn't it depending
Alaska's
on where
had
it's
huge
centered,
earthquakes,
where it happens, though?
In the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're hitting right there in San Francisco.
And along the San Andreas too. There are earthquakes that happen just in these remote areas. So there's a good chance that when that big one strikes, it could be in an area where no one is going to be impacted. That would be the best case scenario.
Sure. Well, it's interesting when you were there, you saw a little something going on. I think California has at least 700 earthquakes a month.
Wow.
And they are all 0.7, 1.0.
It's very small.
2.0. They're small, but if you stand at the register, you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is happening all the time.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of earthquakes in every month here.
And when you feel it for the first time, it's still very startling.
It is.
I know from experience.
Right.
All right. Well, I'm glad you remained upright anyway.